record. Amazing. So once again today, we will be looking at execution. And like you already have touched on the fact that while you are making executions, there are primarily 8 things, 8 that you are going to worry about. The very first one is how to manage risk. The second one is what? How to manage issues, treat issues. Mawa helped us with all of them. The next one you're going to talk about also is what? Artifacts. You are generating artifacts and all the ones that Mawa had already touched on. Let me not spend time there. That's the list. Run through them at your own time. To be very fair to you guys, try to keep these at the back of your mind. It will enrich your knowledge so that whenever you are in a project, you are looking out for these 8 things. How am I going to manage these 8 things? Okay, let's quickly go to where we ended yesterday. Amazing, this is where we ended. Is there any questions from where we ended yesterday? If my guess is good, then it means we're all together on this. Okay, cool. The next thing we're going to touch on today is what you call a contingency response strategy. A contingency response strategy. Now, make it pretty much easy for you. What you need to remember about contingency planning is that there are some risks that open you to other risks. Does that make sense? Now, let me give you an example. During when the pandemic was on the high, some folks who took the vaccine had some reacted to, what do you call it? They reacted to the vaccine in a negative way. Now, you see, we're trying to manage a situation, or we're trying to manage a risk. And then while trying to manage a risk, another thing emerges on the other end. You need to also plan for contingency issues, things that are contingent on the risk response. I hope that makes sense. So these are risks that spring from other risks. Now you have to think clearly and be able to develop a strategy in advance to solve that issue. Moreover, these response that you've developed, you would use them immediately. Those identified risks become issues. What's the difference between a risk and an issue? A risk, just to re-establish this, a risk is something you anticipate will happen, so you plan for it. However, when they happen, they are no longer called a risk. It's now called what? An issue. We will talk a bit more about that as we go down. Good planning properly for risk will help you to react quickly when they happen. And that's why in planning for risk, you need to have what? A very good and a holistic plan. And also factor in the cost, the time, and the impact of those responses. I hope that makes sense. You're allowed to ask questions wherever you feel you did not really get a full picture of what I'm saying. Okay. Thereafter, we've dealt with risk. The next thing we're going to be sitting on right now is executing projects to deliver business value. Now, guys, one thing you need to take to the bank is this. Even if you do a great project, you've met all the scope, you've used the right time, and you've also done what? Done things within budget, within schedule, and in your mind, you've met the scope. If you don't give value as in the person receiving the project, the beneficiary of the project doesn't feel or feel enriched by the value that project has brought, then you might not last in business. So while you are executing, one of the things you must pay attention to is the issue of what? Business value. Am I giving enough value? Now, it's also interesting to get to realize that when we talk about value, we are not looking at perhaps one thing. We're not looking at one thing and saying, okay, this is value and that's not value. No, it's not only about money. Value can consist of a lot of things. Financial value. How much are we going to make from these transactions? New customer value. How many new customers am I going to get? So when you're thinking about business value, have a big picture about it. The next thing is what you call social capital. Let me give you an example. You see, every one of us in this class have automatically become my friend. Automatically. What am I putting forward there now? There is a social capital I have with all of you if I deliver enough value. If there is something else to be done, maybe you want to do something, I'm going to be the one person you will reach out to and say, can we do this together and get this done? Why? You've been able to connect with the person at some level. Social capital. I'm sure you can actually explain this in your own words, really. So I'm not going to spend so much time on that area, but it's something that I believe we all get to have. Even in whatever we do, we're also trying to connect with humans and build strong social capital. Now, the next thing is first to market. There is a first to market advantage. Let me give you an example. I don't know if what I saw was true, but I saw that Tesla has launched a phone that it wants to rival, that would likely rival the iPhone. Now you see, that phone needs to be exceptionally good to rival the iPhone, who has already won over an ecosystem. So the first to market advantage means that you kind of hold a market share that it takes a lot for that market share to be taken away from you. Now, let me give you an example from my own very local parlance. For my own local parlance, I don't know, it might apply to you guys differently. For where I grew up, there was a particular detergent, as at that time, it was a household name. A detergent. Let's call the detergent XYZ. I realized that even till today, people about my age and those who grew up with me, we easily would say something like, go and buy me XYZ. Instead of go and buy me a detergent, we say, go and buy me what? XYZ. It's the name of that detergent that we use to call detergent. So it's synonymous. The name of the detergent is synonymous with detergent for us. You might have similar experiences in your own different environments. Now, improvement. That's another business value of its own. Have we been able to improve? Have we gotten better than we were before? You know, have our processes become better, or are they still old, looking funny? And then the last one, it's technological improvement. Did we improve in our technology? Now, what's the word? What's the meaning of the word business value. Let's find out what the real meaning is and give it some context. It said it's the net quantifiable benefit derived from a business endeavor. In this context now, it will be derived from a project endeavor or from a project. The benefits may be what? Tangible or intangible, and even both. That's why even when social capital is an intangible benefit, it's something you cannot undermine. I hope that makes sense. Even when it might be an intangible benefit, it's something that you cannot undermine. You see it a lot, global politics, you see it a lot in business. It's a really big asset, social capital. All right, let's keep going. You have to establish, you have to ask yourself, what exactly is value to me or to this project? If you were running a development project, what is value to you will be different than if you were doing a business. So you need to sit back and begin to iron out what exactly is value to me. If you're running a development project, let's say the number of people you are able to reach out to will be what? The kind of thing you will be what? Terming as your value. So we reached out to 20,000 people. That would be what value will mean for you. If you're running a business, money might be a big thing. And then the relationships that you were able to create within those times might also be another big thing. How to deliver business value? The first way to deliver business value is to establish and cultivate urgency in the culture. Let me give you an example. Now, I think that's a mistake in the writing. I'll correct that for you. Now, establish and cultivate urgency in your culture. Let me give you a very good example. If I asked you guys and said, please go ahead, each of you go and do me a 1,000 text, 1,000 word research paper, 1,000 word research paper. Send it across whenever you're ready. I'm sure you know some people will never send that across, even in the next 40 years. But if I say I want the paper in the next 24 hours, immediately a sense of urgency will emerge. Because everybody will just wake up because it's just 24 hours that we're working with. Create a sense of urgency when you are managing a project. You also need to be very clear the importance and the vision you have for people. You see, people buy into visions, so your ability to communicate clearly is something that will win people over to you a whole lot more. The third thing is that you yourself as a PM must be an accountable fellow. You know, if people feel that you are laid back, they most likely will want to be laid back because you yourself are laid back. So you yourself must be what? Accountable. And you people, they must see you as one who is what? Striving to that vision. It means you're working hard enough to want to get those things done. You're not just leaving it for others to do it. Moreover, you must represent the voice of the customer in the room. What's the voice of the customer? Each and every one of us, we have a way we want to be treated. If you wanted to buy a phone, let's use for example, if you wanted to buy a phone, there are things you will be looking out for in a phone. If all things were equal, if money was not a constraint and you wanted to buy a phone, there are key things you'll be looking for in a phone. Now, if you are the one charged with a project that is supposed to produce a phone, you must bring that personality into the room. Speak as the customer. Tell your team, if I were the one, I would not buy this product. And that's why I will not support that you do a substandard thing that will not serve the people. Now, the last one is you need to be attentive and a responsive person. Now, that exactly talks about communication. It means you have to have a listening ear and also have a responsive behavior. Someone speaks to you about something, you must respond to the person. Don't just keep quiet. Some people have very good skill in ignoring others. Very good skill in ignoring others. And that's not a very good skill for a PM. You should be an active communicator. Speak, engage, try to understand, and give feedback so that the people have a very clear sense of direction. Now, speaking about delivering value, when you're talking about delivering value, there is something you must take out time to discuss in depth, which is what we call the product roadmap. Why do we discuss product roadmap when we're talking about delivering value? Because most often than not, now hear me. Earlier on, I asked Martina to build me a house. Build me a house. Now, it's not the house Martina would build that is value for me. That's the final product. But there are other values I can derive even in the process of her building the house. I'm going to cite one of them for you. By the time Martina finishes the substructure, even if she does not put the superstructure and the roofings, just with the substructure, the value of that property has gone up. So I have derived some value even without her finishing the task. I hope that makes sense. Guys, even if you don't want to talk, just chat me. I want to be sure you're following every step of the way on this on things I'm trying to talk about today, please. Okay. So I'm deriving some form of value from it at each stage of her work. Now, because I know that there will be some form of value at each stage of work, myself and Martina, I'm the sponsor, she's the one doing the work. Myself and Martina can sit together and draw what we call a product roadmap. What will the roadmap do? The roadmap will itemize, more or less, the values I will be getting at each point in the journey towards the product. All right, what's a product roadmap? A strategic document and plan which guides why the product will be delivered. Why? Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do this kind of substructure? Because what we want to put on this building is a 5-story apartment. So that's why you see what the product roadmap now tells you here. And how the product will meet objectives and the project vision. That's a decent explanation about product roadmap. Now, it's important that you know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. For different kinds of projects, there will be different types of product roadmaps. The one we just cited was the one that had to do with what? Building an apartment. So it varies in appearance and varies in what? Presentation. It displays the strategy and also the direction of the product and the value it will deliver. I've touched on that earlier. It displays what? The direction. This is why we're doing this kind of structure. The strategy we're using is so that this can carry what? A 10-story, a 5-story, or whatever. It lead with the overarching vision of the product. The overarching vision of the product, the word overarching vision is like the supreme vision, the overall vision of the product. What guides you in building a product roadmap? It's the overall vision of the product. Not just what you feel like, but the overall. So you now show these will be the incremental steps towards getting to the final point. So it looks at short-term and also long-term visualization of the product. Thank you. Now, another thing that you could also remind yourself, I don't know if you've forgotten from our first class, is that a product roadmap, it's progressively elaborated over time. What is the meaning of the word progressively elaborated? It's a planning tool. Remember, well, that was in our second class. Progressive elaboration. What's progressive elaboration? Just to remind you, it's your ability to plan things in details right now. As in plan the things you know or the things you're about to work on in details. And then the one you don't know, you don't have all the information for or the resource for, you plan it at a high level. When you're done with the first one, you move to the second one and plan the second part in details. So the more information you have and the resources that you have, you can apply them to plan for the one you're about to do. Then later on, you plan for the other one that you do not really have information or resource for. So you plan based on availability of information or resource. That's what you call progressive elaboration. Or you could also call it what? A rolling wave planning. Speaking about product roadmap, there are things that we call an incremental delivery. And we've said it very clearly that softwares are a very good example of an incremental delivery. Why? With softwares, what they do with softwares is that they identify what are the key things we can learn, we can put together, then launch the software first. Then later on, we do what? We keep adding line upon lines of code. What they've put together, it's an incremental delivery. So they do it gradually and gradually until they get to what? The big stuff. Sometimes there's never going to be an end to it, particularly with softwares. Why do people engage sometimes in incremental delivery? The reason is sometimes you want the product to be delivered soon. You want it immediate, then you can now worry later. Another time is because you want to be able to offer some feedback. Thereafter, we can fine-tune the process and get something perfect later. Now, just so that you remember, the very first product, when you are doing an incremental delivery of product, meaning that you keep adding to the product as you either have the resource or as you have more knowledge, the very first product of that product, the very first one that you launched, that was the basic one, the very basic one. It's always called the minimum viable product. So in the context of an iPhone, the minimum viable product was iPhone 4. It's called the smallest collection of features, smallest collection of features that can be included in a product or customer for customers to consider it functional. The smallest collection of features that can be included in a product for customers to consider it functional. Now, if we were to build a phone company, I would say the minimum viable product would be that the features that the phone must have before we can launch a basic phone for customers to consider it functional means one of them is that the phone must be able to make calls. The second one could be the fact that the phone must be able to send the text. The third could be the fact that the phone must be able to store charges and also to allow itself to be charged, so a decent battery. I think if you launch a phone that can do these three things, you are largely ready for a phone company. Somebody would buy it from you. Now, after you've launched the basic, which is called what? The minimum viable product, you will now begin to look out for what are the other things that my clients or customers want that will enrich their experience. And you know, when it comes to phones, there is a large bouquet of things that customers want to enrich their experience. But because we are a very lean company, we don't have all the resources, we can look at two more. So the next two we're going to be looking at right now is the fact that you can take pictures, photographs. And then thirdly, you can also use a WhatsApp on the phone. Very basic, two things, a picture ability and WhatsApp, two features. And then we will upgrade the phone that we had made earlier. These two features that we have added is called the minimum business increment. Minimum business increment. These are just examples. However, you will know it works differently for different industries and for different products. So what is the minimum business increment, often called the MBI? It's the smallest amount of value that you can add to a product or service that benefits the business. Now, the key word that I want to draw on is the fact that it benefits the business, which is the fact that if we put the phone in there, the camera in there, and we also as well put the what's the second thing? Camera and what do we ask for? And the WhatsApp ability. And yet customers are not willing to pay a premium for that phone, then it's not worth it. I hope you understand that. It's not worth it. You can't call that a minimum business increment. It's only a minimum business increment if it's adding value to the customer and they are willing to pay a premium, which is something extra to get that phone. Okay. Good. The next thing you're going to remember when in delivering value is the fact that you need to have circles and time boxes. What is it about circles and time boxing? When you don't time box people, I'll give you examples. I'm very sure that most of you, there are things that you've procrastinated for at least a year. There might not be much, but one or two things that you've procrastinated for about a year. Now, if I put you on a time box and I ask you to do that thing, perhaps for an exam, it will take you less than 3 days to get what you've been procrastinating for what? A year. That's the power of time boxing. So you need to learn, look, you're making a roadmap, you need to put the roadmap in time boxes. Now, the power of time boxing is that they allow you to do what? Telemetry. To do telemetry. Telemetry is just being able to measure yourself to see, am I doing well within the last 2 months? Have I done well or have not done well? Besides, like we earlier touched on, time boxes create a sense of urgency. We touched on that earlier. And allows you to do what? Make measurements, like we also said. And the third thing is that it also allows people to be able to predict you. Like this class, it's supposed to hold for a day for what? 2 hours, 30 minutes. Because I have an idea that it's just a 2-hour, 30 minutes class, I have to fit myself and fit everything I want to do within 2 hours, 30 minutes. And then at the end of each day, I measure myself to see where I did well, where I lost time, and where I did poorly, and how I can optimize so that the next class, you don't get to feel those same things. That's the power of time boxing. Now, in projects, how does this work in projects? Particularly when you are into Agile, each sprint is time boxed. And also every other review, everything within the sprint is time boxed. Also in normal projects, time boxing will give you the same advantage. What's the cycles about? You see, in Agile, you can time box a sprint, and then after that sprint, another sprint. So you create a circle. So the whole time boxing and circling is about the same thing. So because you've time box events, you can create a circle. After this sprint, another sprint, another sprint. So a circle is created. So that's why you have circled and time boxing. All of these will help you to deliver business value. What's the third thing we're going to be curious about? We're going to painstakingly look out for as people who are involved in execution. The third thing we're going to painstakingly look out for is what? How to manage communication. Before we continue looking at how to manage communication, it will be good that you remember that communication happens both with your internal team. So you are the project manager, you have an internal team that works under you. And also you have an external team which consists of what? Stakeholders. So you need to what? Manage both your internal team and also manage the needs of your stakeholders. Else you would not likely succeed in the issue of communication. Now, communication is one knowledge area, and it has 3 processes. I just put them out there. We did that in the planning class, but just so that you refresh your mind. These are the 3 knowledge processes of communication. Communication has to be what? A two-way street. Means someone is talking and the other one is giving feedback that he or she understands what he is being told, or that he needs clarification where he does not really get the full picture. Now, it could be critical, which is someone who criticizes you and say, I don't like the way you're doing your work. So someone is criticizing you. Then it could also be what? Affirming. So you did something well. Maybe you helped us to read, and then I'm like, well done, thank you very much. So that it could be both critical and it could also be what? Affirming. Feedbacks, whichever way it goes, whether critical or affirming, feedbacks are key. Besides, the feedbacks you get can also be either positive, mean that they've been well understood, or they could be what? Negative. The person does not understand you or is not even willing to listen. Okay, no feedback provides an implicit acceptance of the message by the receiver. So you could get a positive feedback like, yeah, we're here with you, does not necessarily mean that the person is really there with you. So that's why they're saying that no feedback provides an implicit acceptance of the message. But every effective feedback, effective means this person is totally engaging with you on this subject, has to be what? Clear, specific, and offered in a what? Timely manner. I hope that makes sense. All right, let me see how much you've learned to communicate. Get in the chat box and then either just say, I totally understand you, or I have some doubts, I want to ask a question. Go on the chat box and then let me hear from you. All right, that's fine. Thank you, Mawa. Means you totally understand. Okay, while we wait for others, let's get to the new slide. Okay, cool. I think everyone is fine and we're doing well, so thank God. Now, project communication. And I said this earlier, that you need to remember that whenever you're communicating, there are two people you are talking to. One of them is what? The internal customer or the internal stakeholders, which is your team. And the second one is what? Your external stakeholders. It's also important that you remember and that you note that communication could be formal or completely informal. Also, hierarchy. You see, when you're speaking to your boss, you're speaking upward. You can't speak the same way you'll be speaking to someone that is below you. So when you're speaking upward, you need to learn how to adjust tones. Now, it could be official, the way you engage with people using purely official means, and they could also be unofficial. They could be verbal and they could be written. These are things that I'm very sure you're already acquainted with. Now, what would help you in communication? If you remember when we're dealing with planning, we talked about the stakeholder communication requirements or stakeholder management plan, which is a plan that you have sat down to make out, which talks about all our stakeholders, identifies all our stakeholders, identifies their needs, particularly when it comes to their communication needs, how they want to be communicated to, what they want to be told, how often they want to be told, and the means by which they want to be reached. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now, what do you capture in a communication management plan? What are the components of a plan? I've said it already. One of them is the biggest one of them is the communication, the stakeholder communication requirements, which I've already touched on. Information to be communicated, including the language to be used. So that also ties in nicely. What language are we using to communicate? What's the reason I want to communicate this thing? Am I trying to get them on our side to make a decision with us? Am I trying to annoy them? Am I trying to whatever? It's really up to you. Inform. So you must be very clear upon that. And what's the time and the budget? Also, the medium for communication has to be clearly established. Okay. Here's a typical example of a communication management plan. And what does it mean? What does the communication management plan, what does it really mean? A component of the project program or portfolio management plan that describes how, when, and by whom information will be administered and disseminated. So it's a component of the big book. Always don't forget the big book. The component of the big book called what? A project management plan that describes how, when, and by whom information about the project will be disseminated. Hope that makes sense. Now engage with this for a few seconds. So you have communications around kickoff. The frequency, it will be done at the start of the project. Whose responsibility is this? The PMO's responsibility. Who will be the ones that will receive this communication or that will be engaged? Stakeholders, key stakeholders. And then notes, both team and client kickoff meeting is recommended. So you might have two kickoff meetings now, one with the team and one with the client. Okay. Why do you do a communication requirement analysis? It leads to a clear articulation of stakeholder communication needs. I think we've emphasized that over and again. Enables effective choice regarding the technologies to be recommended. It takes the form of a grid, a questionnaire, or survey document, or survey that documents and the communication and technology requirement for each stakeholder. I think I've said it again. I just want to make it again for emphasis. The whole art of communication is tied to stakeholder needs. It's tied to stakeholder needs. There are different types of communication. Some have been found to be what? More effective than some. To be fair, anything that puts two people's faces together, face to face, is going to be what? More effective than what is not face to face. So what's the first type of communication that is very effective? It's a face-to-face communication. What's the next one? If you can't meet face-to-face, let's at least have a video conference. So I can see you, I can see your mannerisms, you can see me, and we can engage. The third one is a telephone. Why is that one also effective? Because we can, when you can hear and feel, when you can hear, see, and feel, it's more powerful than when you're just reading and trying to get into the person's mindset. But when I can hear you, I can feel your mindset faster. Now, the third one, the fourth one, the other ones include a way radio, which is what you see most type of security outfits using. Do you copy? Do you copy? Or policemen use them a lot too. A two-way radio. So one person speaks, the other person answers like that. You can't speak this at the same time, both of you. All right, written addressed document. Written addressed document. So documents come second to the last, an unaddressed document. Now, the reason why addressed document is effective. Now, if you've ever done anything, there's a research that shows that if you write to a stranger and use the word, you are invited to come and do this, he will feel as if you particularly, you know him personally. Because why? You're saying you, as you are really directing to him. On the other hand, if you say something like, we've invited all of you to join us in the following, that person will likely not come because he feels that you invited the whole world and then he is just one of a number. So there's no need for him to come when you've already invited the whole world. The whole world will be there, but he will not, so he will not be noticed. But if you write a you, he's most likely going to come out for that function, only to find out that the whole world was invited. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Communication model. A description, analogy, or schematic used to represent how the communication process will be performed for the project. Now, some communications are two-way communications, and some are simply one-way communications. So one person has to encode, which is speak, and the other person has to what decode, which is understand and act. So when some are two ways, so you see the first one is a two-way, the transmitter transmits, and then the decoder decodes and acknowledges the message. Now, on the other way around, there are some that are entirely a one-way conversation. So one person just transmits and every other person falls in line. Now, the next thing we're going to touch on now, still about communication, is the communication methods. What are communication methods? A systematic procedure, techniques, or process used to transfer information among stakeholders. There are three communication methods, three of them. One is called the push method. The second one is called the pull method. And the last one is called the interactive method. What is the push method? The push method is when companies post things on their website. They push it out there. Whenever you are interested, you can go and engage with those information. That's somebody pushing things out there for you. You go, whenever you care, you want, go and engage with them. We've already pushed it for you. What's the pull method? The pull method is when you write to an establishment and ask them that, come, can you share with me the data you got from your research? So you're the one pulling it. You're the one pulling the information. Or you could write to each other in this place and say, come, did you take notes in the last class? Can you please send them to me? What you are doing is you pulling the conversation. Now, the last one is the interactive, which is the two-way street. You find it very often on chats and on social media, a two-way street, interactive. All right, grab your pen, grab a paper, and we're going to be discussing communication channels. Now, the whole idea about communication channels is the fact that, now do this for me, everyone, do this for me. There are 5 people in a room, 5 people in a room. So you're going to draw 5 people, as in 1 person, 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons, 5 persons. It's going to give you like a pentagon kind of thing. The way you're placing them will look like, should look like a pentagon, should look like a pentagon. Are you ready? Guys, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, draw 5 people, and it's going to look like a pentagon. Once you're done with that, do this for me. I want you to calculate and tell me everybody that you drew must talk to at least, must speak to one person, must speak to everybody. So let's say we have 5, myself, Mawa, Joshua, Abdul Rahman, Adebayo, that's 5 of us. So Adebayo must speak to all 4 of us. Mawa must speak to all 4 of us, all 4 of us. Myself, all 4. Joshua, all 4. Now, you're going to try right now and tell me how many communication lines exist. So draw 5, Abdurrahman, 5 people. So tell me, draw lines around each person, around the thing, and tell me how many communication lines exist. But let's see a simpler way to do it. The simpler way to do it is pretty easy, and it goes with the formula you have on the board. So n into n minus 1 divided by 2. So what is n? 5. What is n minus 1? 5 minus 1, which is 4. So 5 times 4 is what? 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. If you choose 10, if you got 10, you are absolutely correct. If you got anything more than 10, you're wrong. But if you got anything more than 10 and you want us to explain to you how we got ours, you don't repeat the lines. So it's the same line of communication, you understand? So if you count the lines, you're gonna have 10. I hope that makes sense for everyone. If you're writing your exams, and they give you a question, you're writing an exam. This is, I'm training you guys for those who might want to write an exam and for those who are practicing in the industry. If you're writing an exam, this question is likely to come out. So you need to be aware how to deal with it. Okay, I'm sure we're right. All right, okay. Abdurrahman seems to see where he got it wrong. Samaya, Amu Walhad, and Chanel. Did you get where you've got it wrong? Mawar also. Did you see where you got it wrong? If you will back it.
Yes, I saw. I got it.
You got it now?
Yes, I do.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Again, we're back to this whole stakeholder issue. The thing is, like we said when we're doing planning, stakeholders could either mar or help you reach your goals better. So you need to keep them close. You need to learn to engage them. Now let's go, a very simple way to understand stakeholders, very simple way to understand stakeholder thing is your parents. Some folks are very lucky and they have parents that they can, so they grew up as friends with their parents. It means they were very friendly with their parents. They gist about literally everything. And their parents kind of understand their journey. If you had that kind of benefit, you will realize that you did things easily. You didn't need to fight for anything at home. Everything just went easily. You want to do something, you speak to them, they say, okay, go ahead, that's fine. But some people didn't really have that luck. So they had to always be at loggerheads with their parents. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to do my own thing, you know. So sometimes they even become a bit grumpy. But what you need to understand is your ability, the fluidity in your relationship with stakeholders will really help you in having a successful journey managing any project. I'll say that again. The fluidity a child enjoys with his parents helps him most times navigate life easily and more flexible. The same thing, the same fluidity you need when you are engaging stakeholders, because if you get it right with stakeholders, you might land, you would very likely land properly with every project. Okay, don't forget stakeholders abroad. First class, we did this. The stakeholder distribution are very broad. Customers, employees, investors, MPs, local authorities, community groups, environmental partners, and all whatnot. You know, look at anyone who is following the, I think the Duchess of Sussex. The Duchess of Sussex, what's her name? Meghan Markle. Now, if you're following her story, you'll be wondering, what's the whole press thing? The whole press wants to just literally be in her bedroom, you know? And the problem is, they are stakeholders. So you might not like them, but they're stakeholders. So you need to manage them, you know? So that's exactly the way it is. Now, if you've ever read about a guy called Puff Daddy, I don't know if you guys know him. I'm sure some folks will know him. Anyone in class who knows Puff Daddy?
Yes, I am familiar with one of his songs, yeah.
Okay, is it Puff Daddy or 50 Cent? I'm not so correct who I'm referring to right now. But one of them is a master artist. Master artist. Now, one of the things he does, I would call him a con artist, and he's built a business with his corny ideas. In his office, he sometimes, you know, he wants to stay in the news because, you see, artists, they make money by being relevant. So sometimes he could organize a fight. I read his story. I'm mixing it now. I might tell you in the next class who it really is. Now, I read his story, how he could organize a fight between two of his staffs. And before he tells them they should start the fight by 9:15. And then he has called the press, like let's say CNN, and said, please, I would like to have a meeting with you guys by 9 o'clock. So while the press are in his office, the press have no idea that the real reason why they invited them is not even for the meeting, is because they want them to cover the fight. So while they are having the, what do you call it, the meeting, 2 minutes after a fight breaks out in the office, you know what the press do very well now? They start covering, making news out of it. Little did they know that this guy is trying to launch a new product and he needs to go wild. He needs the adverts to go wild. So he has brought them in to work for him for free. Okay, that's a con artist in display, really. But what am I saying this thing? You need some power, you have some ability to manage press. Particularly, I believe, most of you, all of you will go on to manage very big projects. The bigger the projects, you need to realize the bigger the stakeholder involvements. You won't be small, you will go on to manage very big projects. All right, let's keep going. Like we all said during planning, you need to maintain a stakeholder register. What is a stakeholder register? Where you've identified and clearly listed all the stakeholders on your books that influence your project. Not only would you put all your stakeholders, you need to also put their contact details. Put everything about them, their expectations, their influences, primary involvements. You must classify them. Are they internal? Are they external? Because there are some documents you cannot share with your external stakeholder. And there are some you cannot share with what? Your internal stakeholders. You need to understand It's called what? Information. Those in Europe, you do a lot. GDPR. What do you call it? Come on, guys.
We just call it GDPR, like
GDPR, yeah, information governance. What do you call it? Okay, I just called it huh? Give me the right name.
like the personal information.
More or less,
I don't know,
yeah.
like,
It's just information
yeah, but like
governance.
we just call it GDPR. Like there is
GDPR,
no other word.
Yeah, that's it. It's information governance. You're trying to govern what goes to this person and what does not go to the other person. Now, you also need to sit back and classify stakeholders based on what? Interest, power, influence, and impact. You see, the stakeholder with the highest power deserves your respect because he can pull you off that project in one day. Likewise, but a stakeholder with power and interest, those are two strong combinations. What I mean by interest is the fact that he keeps coming to your office every day and asking you, what's the update on this? What's the update on that? That stakeholder is someone you must manage closely because it not only has interest, it also has power. And if he wields that power against you, you might be in for it. Okay. Now, so you need to create a relationship with your stakeholders, even while you are executing projects. Keep them close. Now, a good document to help you in your journey with stakeholders, particularly while you are executing a project, is what you call the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. So you are assessing your engagement with what? Stakeholders. What are the things you look at what are the things you capture on these, what do you call it? On these stuff? Okay, data protection. Yes, that's the word I was looking for, data protection. Yeah. Now, what are the things that we are looking for in this thing? What is our current engagement level with each stakeholder? And what is our desired engagement level with a stakeholder? Now look at stakeholder one. Currently, he is completely unaware about what's going on. But however, where we want that guy to be, we want him to be a supportive stakeholder. Perhaps he has a voice in the community. So we are like, we need his support. We need him to step up and become more supportive because he has a voice in the community. Look at stakeholder two. He's neutral. Every time you go to him, he tells you, I'm okay, no problem, no problem. He's so neutral. But we want him to what? Step up and become what? More supportive. Stakeholder three, he's already supportive. If we bring something to him, he will help you. However, we don't want to be the ones bringing things to him for him to help us. We want him to take leadership when it comes to task. Now, what does this matrix help you to do? With this matrix, you're going to sit back and ask, how can I change stakeholder three from just being supportive? What information do I need to arm him with that can flip him from being what? Supportive to being what? Leading. You might need to play with his psychology here now. Now, one of the things you could do, this is off the text now, could be the fact that you could sell something to him and tell him, sir, if we don't execute this project, maybe you know he's someone who is very passionate about children. We are losing, out of every 1,000 child, 25 children are being lost to the poor supply of water in this community. You know, you are selling to him data. And the guy is like, are you serious? 25? every day on a daily basis. You see, what you've sold to him will automatically make him to start doing what? Sitting up. And I'm like, are you serious? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. You know, so the more when you know what you want and what you need to sell to the person, to get the person from one level of engagement to the other, another level of engagement. Okay, I hope that makes sense for you. Interesting. So once you're done with engaging stakeholders, which is one of the key things you're going to also do, one thing you need to remember is the fact that you are going to create project artifacts in the course of every project. Put it simply, what are artifacts? If you're someone who is close to, you love history, you would know what artifacts are. Sculptures, things that help to do what? Create history. They help you to what? Create history. You know, earlier today, I was like, if we came a bit earlier, let's all do what? Get involved. Let's all take a picture together as an artifact that we had this class sometime in July 2022. Memories. That's an artifact. Likewise, perhaps you may be, I don't know, in your rooms right now, taking notes about some things that you've never heard before that you want to keep close to your heart. What you are doing is you are creating an artifact for this class. So the day someone comes to you and tells you, you've never done a project management class before, you're going to say, no. These are my notes. That's an artifact to show I did this class. You know, here is the picture we did. You understand? In the course of the class, there are several artifacts that will come together for you. It could even be the emails that we shared. You're like, this document, this email was shared when I was in class. Artifacts, project artifacts. Okay, so what are artifacts? Project artifacts are created. Artifacts enable, I think I've talked on that already, the reconstruction of history and to benefit other projects. So two things, they enable you reconstruct history, and the knowledge or the things that are contained in them could also go ahead to benefit other projects. Because perhaps it's also a lesson learned register is an artifact. So that also can help to benefit other projects. Now, hear this. I've said it already, but just to reiterate it for knowledge, it says teams create and maintain many artifacts during the life of a project. Many. And I've explained a few for this class. Now, project artifacts are created during project work. This facilitates the management of projects. However, you should not confuse an artifact with a deliverable. A deliverable is not an artifact. This is a unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, a phase, or a project. Your certificate at the end of this class will be what? A deliverable. But the notes you copied is not required. It's not even a requirement for the class. But the notes, the notes you copied is not really what? A requirement, but it's an artifact. It will help you to reconstruct your learning if you're reading some time again. Now, product documents are integral documents for a project. They define and support the work of the project. They are regularly updated by the project management plan processes, sorry. Okay, let's see examples of artifacts, just so that it enriches your understanding. What are examples of what artifacts? If you can see my screen, then you have a decent list of artifacts. The very first one is what? Acceptance criteria. Assumptions. A business case. Change request. Constraints. Lesson learned. Minutes of status of meeting. A charter. A slide deck, requirements, scope baseline, subsidiary management plans. My first question to you before I move forward from here, someone should boldly step in there and tell me what is the meaning of the word subsidiary project management plan. A subsidiary project management plan. Let's resume recording. Okay, now, cool. Now, you remember when we touched on the fact that there are 3 key areas you plan. And those 3 key areas are what forms the tripartite angle. And what are the 3 areas? Scope, time, and what? Scope, budget. Time, and
Budget.
Cost. Yeah, budget, yes. Good. Now, those 3 areas, for any adjustment to be made to them, you must go for approval. And because you have to go for approval, they are often called what? Baselines. Their scope management plan is called, put together, it's always called what? A baseline. The scope is called a baseline, because you have to get approval anytime you want to make changes. So the word baseline is synonymous with the word approval. It means you cannot change me until you get an approval. Make sense? Yes. Now, that's why the scope, the cost, and the time are always called baselines. Baselines. That was from yesterday's class. So these are the 3 big books, the 3 big books in the what? The big book of what? Project management plan. Other knowledge areas like communication, like procurement, like what all the other 7, integration, all the other 7 are actually known as what? Subsidiary plans. So they are like minor profits. The other 3 are like what? Major profits in the big book of project management plan. Guys, go on the chat box and establish that you understand what I'm saying. I need to see everyone give me that feedback before I move. I want to be sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay. Now we've looked at, in details, project artifacts for normal projects. How about project artifacts for what? Agile projects. The backlog. I'm sure everyone knows what a backlog is. The project increment. What is being required that we should add to the project? The product roadmap. The product vision statement. The release plan. All of these are what? Artifacts, documents that help you to reconstruct history. That's just the simple word to understand it. Documents that help you to reconstruct history about that project. Okay, An interesting thing that we will touch on, I think we've already initiated this conversation during planning, but let's look at it again during execution. It's called the configuration management. Configuration management. What is configuration management? A tool used to manage a product, used to manage changes, in a product or service being produced, as well as changes to any project document, is a tool used to manage changes. A tool, let me put it simply, a tool used to manage changes, either to the project, the product or service, or the product document. Now, hear this. When we're explaining this while we were in planning, I gave you a simple scenario. And I said to you, take for instance, the scope has been approved. And then the scope is saved in a place, in a warehouse on your desktop that you've called Project 1, a folder called Project 1. Think about that, just follow the picture in your head. There's a folder on your desktop, you've called it Project 1. So scope has been approved. You save the work, you save the scope into that folder. Now, in the course of the work, scope, there was a request for change. And then that request was approved. Now, just see this now. Because that request was approved, it means that scope has done what? Changed. Now, and because scope has changed, and it might also mean that schedule has changed and cost has changed and all those kind of things. Yeah, good. When you now try to save the new scope, normally, if it was in your system, what it will do, it will overwrite the old scope, is it? Now, but when you have a tool, a configuration management tool, it will not overwrite the old scope. What it will do is called versioning. So what it will do is it will create a version, a new version of scope. So the first version, it will call it 1.0. And the second version, it will call it 1.1. Every time you click on scope to try to see what is the scope, the system will automatically reference the newest scope. Get it? However, should there be a need for you to do like an audit to find out something, you can go back and reference previous scope, approved scope that have been saved on that system. Any of you who uses SharePoint will understand what I'm talking about.
I understand fully.
What is it?
Sorry, I understand fully.
You understand fully, Abby?
Yeah.
Cool. It's a pretty simple explanation. So it maintains versions. However, should you want to retrieve scope, it will only retrieve the newest version. But it has a special way you can access to find old scope if you want to reference it. Why do you have a configuration management tool or system? Because sometimes you want to trace and find out where did we get it wrong. Maybe there's an issue has happened in the project and you want to go back and dig out and say, where did we get it wrong? It's obvious that we missed it somewhere. Oh, I see. Perhaps it's at the point where we made this change. This change, nobody saw that this change was going to affect cost, and this has grossly messed up with our cost. They estimated it was going to cost a $20,000 increase. However, we ended up spending $70,000 on that cost, on that change. I see this is where the problem came from. You know, that's the power of the configuration management tool. Now, the system, you see, a tool has its own system. So the system is just a collection of procedures, the procedures used to track project artifacts. It means you can track it and monitor and control changes to these artifacts. You can track those changes. I had mentioned that already. Okay. What is version control? Version control is a system that records changes to a file in a way that allows you to retrieve previous changes made to it. And I've already said that config management manages what? Does version control. Now, that system that allows you to record changes to a file, like the one I explained earlier, and allows you to retrieve previous changes is not often called version control. Each time a file is updated, it gives it a new version number. I've said that already. It includes what? A date and time stamp and the name of the user who made the changes, providing a digital paper trail of the document history. Use version control. Version control is just recommending now to you on the need to use version control for important project artifacts. Why are we recommended to use it for important artifacts? Because tomorrow you might want to do an audit, and versioning will help you. You may have had an experience, some of you may have had it in your own small and little way, where you mistakenly made a correction to a document, and then you just press Control S. And then you now try to, and then you forgot, you switched off the system. And then 3 days later, you open that system and realize that, I had mistakenly corrected this document in the wrong way. But you cannot go back to the old version of that document, and you feel so bad. That's exactly what version control tries to avoid. Okay. Now there is a need for you to, we're still talking about what? Project artifacts during execution. You need to store artifacts in an accessible location. There are not things you hide away from those that need them. However, you should hide away from those that should not see them. Still going back to what? Data protection. It's not everything that everybody should see. You need to learn how to work protect, but sometimes allowing some people see a particular project artifact might actually not work in the best interest of the project. I hope that makes sense. Use a cloud-based document storage and retrieval system for large projects. I'm sure you know about cloud-based documents and storage for large projects, particularly when they were distributed on teams geographically so that they can all access it. Typical systems may include built-in version control. So typical system that does storage of artifacts often have what? Version control, document check-in and check-out, user-based document security. What is user-based document security? Data protection. Let the right user see it, and let those who don't have the privilege to see that document should not be given access to it. And automatic email notification to specific users when a document is created or edited. Make sense? There are some documents that when you create them, it should set a trigger to those who will benefit from that document. This document has been created. That's a good way to manage project artifacts. What other things do we need to know about what artifacts management? It's a good way to produce and control documents. It provides what? Standardized formats and templates. A structured process for the review and approval of documents. It provides for what? Version control and security and timely distribution of documents. These are the advantages of project artifact management. Okay. Where are we? On the 6th area of attention when we are doing execution. And what's the 6th area? It's simply called managing project changes. Managing project changes. And it's good to remind us that projects are all about change. Change happens a lot in projects. Where are the sources of change? Look at it. One of them is what? Inaccurate initial estimates. Another one is what? Specification changes. The third one is what? New regulations. And then the fourth one is missed requirements. I'm confident you all know what each of them mean, really, because we touched this during the planning lecture. So you might want to just revisit those things again. A change control system. Please, if you need me to reiterate anything that you've seen, just call my attention, I'll do that. I know most of them are things that we've done already, but I don't want to go back to them. A change control system is a set of procedures. That's the word now, procedure, that describes how modification to the project deliverable and documentations are managed and controlled. It's a set of procedure. You and I would be able to relate with change control system. Take, for instance, when you were in school, in college, or wherever, or in your workplace, before you make some changes or you request some things, you will fill a form. Those forms will have form numbers for tracking. And there will be a procedure where you can track it as a tracking method. The process talks about what do you need to do? Do you need to fill the form with your passport, with your ID card? Do you need to sign off on the form? Are there documents you will need to file along with that form before you can be listened to? Supplementary documents. Imagine when you are applying for what, whatever, whether at work or in school. Then the approval levels. If you wanted to walk out of the toilet and walk out to the restroom to ease yourself, your class teacher can handle that. You can just take permission from that from the class teacher. If you are going to leave the school and not be around for the next 1 week, the teacher must communicate to the head teacher for approval. You know, these are using very basic examples now. There are responsibilities the class teacher can approve. There are some he himself cannot approve. He has to submit it to what? The head teacher. There are even some the head teacher cannot even approve. He or she must take it to the board before they can be approved. Approval levels. That's a simple change control management flowchart. So a change is coming in from, you see the purple board, a change is coming in. And when a change is coming in, you log the change. Now, these are if you're not familiar with flowcharts, When you see the diamond sign means decision making. Then the square signs means input. So the diamond sign is a decision point. So a level of approval is there. That level of approval, to some, they could reject it from outrightly. Some, it could be left to pass. If it's accepted, it goes to another level of approval. If it's accepted, it has to go down to some more documents. You prepare some more supporting documents and then go to the third level of approval. It could be different levels of approval, but that's a simple one for you to use to learn. Okay. Who are those that decide if a change will pass or a change will not pass? Yes, approval levels, but what are they really called? They are called a change control board. Change control board. Change control board. A formal chartered group. It means they have the authority and they are responsible for what? Reviewing the change request you sent. They are also responsible for what? Evaluating it. The word evaluating it is the word analyzing it in respect to other factors. What will be the impact on cost? What will be the impact on time? What will be the impact on this, on that, on this, and on that? And for recording the communication, and for recording and communicating such decisions. So they will record it. So the change control board are the people who would record this thing. And where did they record it? In the configuration management system. And they will also communicate it. They will push it to everybody. This has been approved or this has been cancelled. Okay? A change request. There are different types of change requests. There are 4 primarily broad groups of change requests. Now, you need to remember, writing an exam, going to the workplace, don't think everything is always formal. Not really. It could either be a formal change request or it could actually be a completely informal change request. Like your boss tells you, you might need to come to work tomorrow by 7 in the morning. Way earlier than the normal agreement was. That's an informal change request. Make a change to your schedule for tomorrow. I need to see you by 7. Let's start working very early before others come to the office. Informal. And also remember that any stakeholder can request for a change. It does not have to be only the sponsor, any of them. Who are stakeholders? People or groups people or groups that can be affected or can affect a project. If I notice that the road you are building would affect my farm, I can request for a change. Make sense? Now, so any stakeholder can actually request for a change, so always remember that. But however, whenever a change is requested, it has to go through the integrated change control process, which is the process for approval. Now, the first thing to remember today is corrective actions. When they want you to correct something, that's simply put, that's the way it's called. Preventive actions, they say do this to avert another problem that is coming on the way. A defect repair, it means a defect has been sustained and they are saying, let's correct that defect. So you see corrective, preventive, defect repair, and the other beautiful one is the one they call update. So there are things they've come to know, which is better than the previous thing that was planned. And they are saying, let's make what? An update to this process. I trust that you are picking up every word. get into the group chat and please just let me know that you are with me, and we can move to the number 7, managing project issues. All right. Thank you, Mawa. You've been quite supportive from the chat. All right, cool. Now, managing project issues. Now, before I continue, I want to draw your ears a bit. Risk is not the same thing as issues. Even though I'm not allowed to draw your ears, but please draw your own ears and say, Atido, risk is not the same thing as what issues are. What are issues? Risks are things that you anticipate can happen, so you plan for them. When those things happen, they become what? Issues. I hope you've drawn your ear. If it's not, the ear is not paining you, draw it again, let it pain you. But remind yourself one more time that risk is not issues. A risk is anticipated for. An issue is when they crystallize. Oh yeah, with a wide smile on your face. Another thing to remind yourself about is that a risk can either be negative or positive. However, an issue is always negative. Just send me a chat and say, I hear, so that I know that you dragged your ear and you can hear what I'm saying. A risk can be negative or positive, but an issue is only always what? Negative. Okay, let's go on the ride. Thank you for those who hear me. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Yeah. All right, let's go. So what is an issue? The word there is a current condition. Is current. It's happening to us now. Or situation that may have an impact. It may have an impact, it may not have, but we need to hold it, check it. On the project objective, an action item that the project team must what? Address. How do you address an issue? You plan for a risk by preparing a what? A response called a risk response. But how do you address an issue? You do what you call what? A walk around. A walk around. I can re-emphasize it so that you don't ever forget. You plan for a risk by preparing a risk response. But for an issue, you must do a walk around. Why? Because an issue is a current situation that you must address. You and your team must address. Where are the sources of risk? The first source of issues are what? Quality. If you begin to look at examine quality and see that there is what you are doing might not finally culminate into the right quality, then an issue is on the ground already. Sources of issues, communication. You are having a quarrel with your stakeholders. That's an issue because it's going to bring you more problems. Procurement. You and your vendors are dragging your shirts. There is problem on the way. Issue. Schedule control. You are not effectively controlling the schedule. The schedule is falling out of your hands. Issue. Cost control. Cost is slipping out of your hands. Scope control. Scope is slipping out of your hands. Things are not going the way it was planned to go. And then other sources, other ways to identify issues is when the project variance analysis is done. What is variance? Variance is simply actual against measuring actual against planned and see if there are any discrepancies. When an issue is, or it's a current situation, so immediately you identify an issue, you have to document the issue. Get that? Immediately you identify an issue, you have to document that issue. Similarly to the way you document a risk in a risk register, in this case, for an issue, you document it in what you call an issue log. However, the same components that you document for a risk register are the same things you will document for an issue. What are the things you document in an issue log? Look at them there. The issue type, the description, who raised the issue, what's the priority, the resolution date, and perhaps the current status. There's also something you must have there. Who is the risk? Who is the word owner? Very important. Who is it assigned to is there? Who is assigned to this risk? That is often called the risk owner for risk, or the issue owner for what? Issues. I trust you are with me. Okay, how do we resolve issues? The other slide, the thing on the other slide, we touched on them already. One is in the future, one is in the past. All right, that's fine. How do we resolve issues? Immediately an issue happens, document it in an issue log. Assign an owner to be responsible to it. Let a realistic due date be given and every attempt made to nip it in the bud. Issues have to become regular topics in your meetings. In your daily meetings, your weekly meetings, issues must be a regular topic so that you can address them. Limit the number of open issues to a manageable number. Meaning that if you are managing a project and you have over 100 things on your issue log, the tendency to be successful in that project is very low because you're not managing your issues properly. Don't hesitate to escalate issues to your project sponsor if it begins to have a major effect on the project. My take is any issue is good. That I'm not saying communicate everything, but when you begin to see an issue and an issue is becoming big, escalate immediately. The reason is that it might affect every other thing if you don't manage, it's not managed properly. Besides, sometimes escalating helps you to get another perspective, insight into how you could do a thing better. So I always recommend escalate. You guys are absolutely amazing, and we are going into what? Ensure knowledge transfer and management is done. Who remembers this? Explicit and tacit knowledge. If you remember, we said in the first class that there are two kinds of knowledge. One of them is what? Explicit. And the word explicit is the word something you can explain. Explicit, something you can explain. Tacit, something you cannot necessarily explain. Now, explicit can be codified using symbols such as words, numbers, and pictures. Something you can explain can be codified, can be documented, and can be shared with others. However, personal knowledge are not so easy to articulate, share. I'm going to give you guys a very good example about explicit and tacit knowledge. Thanks for your kind words, Joshua. Now, think about this. Can everyone in this class drive a bicycle? Guys, I will need your feedback now. Can everyone in this class drive a bicycle? Yes, I can. Okay. How about the rest of the 12?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm getting a yes from everyone here now. I'm looking for someone that drove a bicycle after the age of 9. Oh, Flopsy cannot drive. So interesting. Cool. Right, yes. Oh, interesting. We've got amazing riders here. All right, maybe we should do a bicycle competition, guys. Let's see how good you guys can. Who can beat me? Okay. Interesting. Now, did anybody here drive a bicycle after the age of 9 or 7? Anyone who drove after the age of 7?
No.
Yeah, I think me.
You, interesting. Oh yeah, come on board. Okay, Abdurrahman also, come on board. I'm looking for you guys. Now, when you watched other kids who rode their bicycles, I think you felt it was easy. Abi? Put your mics on. Let's chat a bit. When you were about the age of 9, 7, when you had it's easier to ride a bicycle when you're younger, like 4, 5. When you start getting to 7, 9, you become more aware. You're seeing other kids driving their bicycles, and you're like thinking it could be very easy. And they will tell you, just ride, just be looking forward, just be holding the thing, be going forward. And then you're doing exactly the same thing, you're falling over. Anybody here that did that fell over? And come on, man, where are you guys? Where in the world are you? God, is anybody in this class that I'm left alone?
No, I'm here.
Did anybody fall over from their bike?
Yes, we fall all the time.
Okay, somebody fell over. See, I'm trying to show you something. If you ever fell over from your bike, when you fall over from your bike, what were you thinking about? Well, this thing is easy now. Even that person is driving. Why am I falling over? Did you have that experience? Come on, just talk. I did many times. Abdurrahman, just talk. Why are you always afraid of talking? You rather chat than talk. Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Now, because you had that experience, Abdurrahman, the question is, they taught you everything. They told you hold the bike like that. They told you drive like this. They told you everything. But did that help you? No. You kept falling. What they sold to you was explicit knowledge. What can be explained. However, in your trying and trying until you get it, you gain tacit knowledge. I hope that makes sense to everyone. So,
Yes, sir.
So there you go.
Yes.
Cool. So tacit
Yes,
knowledge.
clear.
Clear. Okay, good. You can be, some things can be explained to you, but some things you just have to engage with them before you really get to appreciate them. Another good example of this is go for a graphic design school. That's when you will realize that explicit knowledge is not tacit knowledge. It's absolutely different. You will need to keep doing it, keep watching, keep observing before you can soak in good graphic skills. All right, I wouldn't spend more time there. Okay, knowledge transfer, just to remind you, because I know we touched on this yesterday. Knowledge transfer in projects is on two. Whenever you hear knowledge transfer, your mind should go to two things. And what's the two things? One, it's on what? Lesson learned, and the other is what? Lesson learned, and the other is in what?
Transition planning.
Amazing. I like the fact that you kept this together. Transitioning. You were in class yesterday. Now, knowledge also should be managed across three levels: individual level, project level, and organization level. Individual, project, and organization. What does that mean? Each team member needs to know how to perform their work. So it means you are training people on an individual level, trying to build them individually. Right now, all of you are building yourself individually. And how do you do that? One, by research, personal research. Two, by what? Collaborating with others. Maybe you're like, let me come and work with you in your studio. You're improving yourself, improving your knowledge. The third one is what? By examination of what? Knowledge repository, which is you examine things, you go and read documents and all of that. Another level of knowledge transfer is actually in the context of a project. So in the project team, you focus on what? Achieving the current project objectives. You organize and facilitate meetings where everybody can learn. So you're transferring knowledge. This is how we do it for this project. This is how we do for this project. And the third level of knowledge transfer is at an organizational level. You see, a knowledge transfer can be happening in a project at a project level, but might not cascade into the what? Organizational level. And sometimes it happens at the organizational level, and that way it cascades into all what? That's the biggest level. It cascades into all projects and also into every individual. Okay. Lesson learned. I said, whenever you think about knowledge management, think about two things: lessons learned and transition readiness. So, lessons learned, first topic on our table today. We've spent a lot of time explaining and talking about this in planning. The knowledge you gain during a project, which shows how project events were addressed. It shows you how things were addressed or should be addressed in the future. How things were addressed or should be addressed in the future, in order for us to what? Improve future performance. It actually includes what? Both positive lessons and negative lessons. And one key thing it is big on is that it must help you not to reinvent the wheel all the time. It's actually a long-term learning tool. The topics that are often covered in a lesson learned register, but it's not limited to this, are how conflicts were managed, relationship with vendors, which vendors were cool to work with, and the ones that were not necessarily cool to work with, that I would advise we should deter from. Our customers, what are the profile of our customers? Are they 16 to 18? Are they 15 to 20? You understand? Our customers, it's the strategy that we used and the tactics we used to get the markets we got in the last sales. Okay. Lessons learned are always recorded in the what? Lesson learned registers. So for every project, you would have your own what? Lesson learned register. Now, But when you look at an organizational level, all the other projects in the organization, when you put together all the lesson learned registers together, you now have what you call a lesson learned repository. Once again, I must remind you that the lesson learned register and repository most often informs or helps inform how the OPAs of an organization are designed, the policies, the processes, and the procedures in organizations. I hope that makes sense to you. Call me if you need me to come back, but I'm just reiterating the things that we've discussed during planning. Okay, in every team, there are project responsibilities. Who wants to help me to read this part? Please, someone help me read. Let me take a break.
Project responsibilities within the team. Leadership to communicate the organization's vision and inspire the project team to focus on the goals of the project. Facilitation to effectively guide a group to a successful solution. Facilitation to effectively guide a group to successful solution to a problem. Political awareness to keep the project manager aware of the organization's political environment. Networking to facilitate relations among project stakeholders so that knowledge is shared at all levels.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Now, the first thing that I wanted to draw on is the fact that there are things you need. These are good skills to have. Leadership. A PM must have very good leadership skills, and not only the PM. Even if you're heading a unit in a project, you must have very good leadership skills to communicate the organization's vision and inspire your team to fulfill what they ought to fulfill. The next one is what? Facilitation. You know, the art of facilitation is to get people to do what they have to do. Strong skill too, is a strong leadership skill. Political awareness. You know, we talked about social capital earlier on. If you're politically aware, you'll be able to actually create a very decent synergy among people because you have very good political skills. And then networking ties in very nicely with political awareness. If you are politically aware, you will network in a very nice and decent manner. Very good skills to have as you transit into the world of being a project manager. Okay. You see, one of the things you need to remember today is the fact that working environment expectation. I think we touched on this in our first class, but I need to reiterate it for you to still understand that the success of your project is not only about the big things. The basic things like the work environment that you have can make or mar your productivity. So we're in execution. Knowledge is not constant. What we knew yesterday can change what we knew yesterday can change based on what we did today. Continuously evaluate your project environment for new risk and follow the risk management plan to proactively address them before they become issues that may affect the project objectives. Don't hoard information. I'm sure you know that new risk could be the fact that your team they don't have the adequate resource to work with. That could be a risk. Or the resource is going bad. Don't hoard knowledge. It's very important. Follow the communication management plan and inform stakeholders of changes affecting your work or their work. Use appropriate tools to share knowledge with stakeholders. Appropriate tools based on what? The stakeholder engagement requirements. Face-to-face during formal meetings, face-to-face during informal meetings and discussions, telephones, emails, wikis, intranets, and printed documents, depending on what was agreed with the stakeholder. Knowledge transfer. Okay. That's our last page. Network, facilitate interest groups. Facilitate interest groups, meetings, seminars, train, work shadowing. These are ways to engender good knowledge transfer. These are techniques or ways to engender good knowledge transfer in a project. Networking, facilitating, meetings, trainings, and even work shadowing are all ways to engender good knowledge transfer techniques. Now, thank you very much once again for being in class with me. I'll take your questions now. So I'll stop the recording and then I'll take